Okay, so for our presentation, we're going to talk about the U.S. energy in 2050. I'm Caitlin Doyle.
I'm Amanda Humphreys.
I'm Natalie Noblin.
And I'm Austin Lowe.
Okay, so in recent years, there's been a decline in efficient energy resources as we become more dependent on fossil fuels while ignoring more efficient but also sometimes more costly choices. Throughout this presentation, we'll discuss how energy and production will change in 2050. So our thesis is that in 2050, there will be major changes in the U.S. because of improvements in the industry, which is illustrated with renewable and non-renewable resources. That was our thesis. So for my part, I'm talking about gas and oil. First thing you need to know that is between 2003 and 2008, there's been a huge spike in the prices of crude oil because of potential of it changing hands. So basically everyone who had their hands on the oil market kind of freaked out, like raised all the prices because they knew like their wells were drying up and it was going to change and there's going to be more regulations. So they just wanted to make as much money as fast as possible. In 2002, OPEC, which is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, started raising the price of crude oil. Since 2002, the price has jumped by about 4 times what it was in 2002. This is just due to them trying to regulate and restrict more of the world dependence on it. Their thoughts were just kind of like, if we raise the prices, people will try and use other resources, and then we won't run out of fossil fuels as fast. That just led to a lot of people being stressed out about not being able to buy gas for their cars. People who are on the other side of the argument, who try and say that fossil fuels are not going to run out, like to say that petroleum will last forever. They keep saying that we're always going to find a new place to drill, it's not going to dry up, like they just go on and on about it. But however, this is really not true, because even if there are more places to drill, we can't always get to them, or if we can get to them, it's really dangerous to do it. It costs a lot of money, and people have the potential of getting hurt, because drilling's not exactly always safe. One of the types of drilling that they're talking about moving to is shale gas, which is trapped in little pockets in shale. It's not very permeable, so it doesn't move very well within the rock. So what you have to do is use hydraulic fracturing, which is also called fracking, to pump in sand, water, and chemicals, and you try and widen the cracks in the rock to pump out the gas. This can be very dangerous because it's kind of hard to control. Sometimes once some rock starts cracking, it doesn't stop. So it leads to things like sinkholes and stuff like that. And it's also very expensive, so only a few people can afford to actually drill this way.
So I'm going to be talking about the different types of renewable energy, or I'm going to specifically focus on 3 of the main types. So I'm going to start out by talking about wind energy, which has grown steadily and over the years has increased to more than 25%, but it only provides a small fraction of the world's energy currently. So how it works is the wind spins the turbine, which is connected to a shafter inside, and that spins, and that's connected to a generator, which supplies the energy to everyone who needs it. It is a clean source of renewable energy, and it doesn't have very many operational costs, so it's pretty cheap to use. The only downside to wind energies, though, is that if there is no wind, there's not much energy to be gathered. And the industry experts predict that by the year 2050, wind power will supply 1/3 of the world's energy. Now I'm going to be talking about biomass, which is energy based off of plant material. The most popular type of biomass is wood. It's a renewable resource as long as the rate of extraction doesn't exceed the rate of production. So we have to be careful that if we get really into biomass, we can't overuse the materials that we're growing, because that will be hard on the environment. And hopefully, by the year 2050, we will reduce our nation's dependency on foreign oil, because they're trying to use biomass to fuel like cars to help reduce that dependency, and that will be really good for our country, as well as improve the air quality because it's not producing as many harmful chemicals like our gas and oil products are, as well as support rural economies, because if we do focus more on biomass, we're going to have to have specific people who grow a lot of resources for this, because it will take a lot of resources. And finally, I'm going to be talking about solar power or solar radiation, which is obviously energy harvested from the sun. According to the International Energy Agencies, it says by the year 2050, the world could be getting a quarter of its electricity from solar power. And currently, right now, solar power powers houses, and currently they're starting to power a lot of buildings, like within cities, which is really helpful because it saves a lot of energy resources. And as you can also see, they've started putting solar powers on cars, and it's not really fueling the car or making it go. It's more using or saving gas by making the car cool down, or other functions that you still use the gas but are not needed to fuel it.
So the number one contributor to global warming is the use of non-renewable resources, the main source being fossil fuels. Non-renewable sources are energy sources that are consumed faster than nature can produce them. Fossil fuels such as gas, oil, coal, and nuclear energy take hundreds and hundreds of years to form. The CCS, which stands for the CO2 capture and sequestration, is an organization created to help clean the coal. So what it does is there's a strong chemical wash, and it washes down all the minerals, and then there's a hot steam that goes over them. And it reduces the amount of CO2 going into the atmosphere, which creates our global warming. The U.S. relies mainly on coal, making sure that by 2050 it will not run out. And America has recently created an organization called the Nuclear Power Program, which ensures us that we will never run out of nuclear energy. So coal is the most abundant non-renewable source. It's a backbone of all power production and is used to generate more than half of the electricity in the U.S. Between 2001 and 2011, coal dominated the global demand picture, while holding about 45% of it. The U.S. has the world's largest reserves of coal. Our nation has created over 1 billion short tons of coal just in 2012 alone, and over 81% of that was used to generate electricity in the U.S. The IEA, which is the International Energy Agency, estimates that we'll have an increase of about 43% by next year, by 2020. And burning coal creates global warming by sending out the carbon dioxide into the air. So the IEA also believes that we'll have coal because it's insanely cheap and abundant. Coal can be bought for about $1 to $2 when compared to $6 to $2, which is how much gas and oil costs. The most important piece of technology is the CCS, which cleans So nuclear energy does the opposite. It doesn't create pollution for society or economy. It's the world's #1 source for emission-free energy, and it prevents the acid rain and the climate change. The use of our power plants helps generate heat and electricity. The IAEA is an organization that estimates that the world's nuclear power will continue to grow. By 2020, 4 to 6 new plants are supposed to be built. Nuclear energy plants are great for our environment, and with the growth of the nuclear engineers, our nuclear power will never decrease.
So I'm going to be talking about the power grid, and this is the picture of the power grid. So the power plant consists of a spinning electrical generator, which is powered by either a hydroelectric dam, a diesel engine, gas turbine, or a steam turbine. The steam turbine is the most common one used in our power plants in the U.S. And those turbines are either powered by coal, oil, natural gas, or a nuclear reactor, as shown in this picture. And this creates three-phase AC power. And so there's AC power, which is known as alternating current, and there's DC power, which is a direct current. And the difference between DC and AC is it's actually more, it's an extra step to convert the AC power, which is what the power plant naturally creates, to DC power, which is also not accepted by these transformer drums on the power lines. And it's also more expensive to convert direct current to AC current, which is what your house is powered by. So next we'll talk about the backwards. We're talking about our transformers, which are right like this here and here. And this first transformer substation, it increases the voltage that is from the power plant to around 155,000 to 765,000 volts for long distance travel, so that it doesn't you don't lose a lot of power while you're transferring it to suburban neighborhoods or whatnot. And then the second power substation takes that voltage from long distance travel and it lowers the voltage to less than 10,000 volts. And then the power is split off into different directions and goes through those power lines, many of which are now underground. And then this transformer drum right here takes the power from 7,200 volts and decreases it to 240 volts, which goes into the house and which is consumed by all of us. And so, next slide. As we can see, this picture shows all the different kind of power plants, and we can see kind of in this area we have a lot of coal, and on the west there's more hydroelectric dams, I guess, that they get power from. And so the future of the power grid is a lot more sensors. So basically, power companies have to match the demand for power to the supply of power almost instantaneously. So they can't make a bunch of power and just hold it just hoping that it gets taken. So the second you plug something in, then they have to give you power. So it's really hard for them to create enough power without them knowing. And so we have the introduction of the smart meter, which measures how much power you're using, so that the power companies can get a better idea of how much energy they're going to have to produce, and so they can start making trend lines and all that stuff, so that they can kind of try to guess. And then there's also going to be introduction of similar sensors all along the power grid, so that they can better measure how much energy is coming from the power plant, how much is actually making it to the power lines before it goes to your house and whatnot. And then, so more sensors is going to mean that there's going to be less blackouts, and that means we'll have less spinning standbys. And spinning standbys are effectively, they're kind of like power plants that are just in case all of a sudden a bunch of us need a bunch of energy. So if a storm all of a sudden hits and everyone turns their heaters on, then they use that spinning standby to create the energy so that blackouts do not occur. And those are really expensive to just have running and whatnot, so they're not really environmentally friendly. So when we reduce those, we'll actually introduce smarter energy sources such as wind energy and biomass energy and all the other different types of environmentally friendly energy that is less reliable, but it will be better for our environment in the long run. So in conclusion, energy consumption and production will become smarter and more efficient in the U.S. in 2050. Additionally, the U.S. will adopt cleaner but less reliable sources of energy. And then on the next 4 slides, we have our sources. And that is it.